Hello and welcome to this channel once again. In this video, I want to respond to the requests made by Esther Dhanraj. You want to know what are those requests? Here they are.
Any eyewitness accounts of the day, time, month, year, location of his one of its kind crucifixion, death, resurrection, ascension?
So, as you heard, she wanted eyewitnesses account about the birth, death, resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ. Any eyewitnesses account? Are there any eyewitnesses account? Okay, let me give you the eyewitnesses account. Now here you see the Bible. The first four Gospels in the New Testament are Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. In Luke's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 1, it says that inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. Now, Luke is saying that anybody who wanted to compile the narrative of the events that happened about the birth, death, resurrection and teachings of Jesus Christ, Luke says that the eyewitnesses were readily giving those evidences and testimonials to those people, and accordingly Luke says that he collected from them and set them orderly for Theophilus. Now, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John are the four eyewitnesses that we have, eyewitnesses reports that we have for the birth, death, resurrection and the teachings of Jesus Christ. So for any historian, these four Gospels are the primary sources or primary evidences for consideration about the birth, death, life and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So here, since you have asked the eyewitnesses reports, here they are. These are the eyewitnesses reports. Matthew was the disciple of Jesus Christ. John was the disciple of Jesus Christ. Luke was a physician who worked closely with Apostle Paul, but while he was writing the Gospel, the Luke's account, he collected the information from the eyewitnesses and jotted down the narrative in orderly way. Mark was writing the Gospel under the guidance of Apostle Peter. So first four Gospels that we have in the New Testament, the first four books, they are the eyewitnesses accounts. So Esther, here is your eyewitnesses accounts and the reports that you asked for. But then, oh wait, let's see whether she has any more requests.
Why can't they provide substantial proof that Jesus exists? If they have any, that is. When logical people ask them for evidences beyond the four Gospels, why can't they show it?
So she wants proof beyond the four Gospels. Do Christians have beyond the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, beyond these four Gospels, do Christians have evidences? Of course they have. So evidences for what? For the existence of Jesus Christ, for the proof that he existed, he lived, he taught, he had followers, his death and resurrection and ascension. So do we have? Yes, we have. Are we willing to give? Of course we are willing to give. I thought you wouldn't ask. So let me give you those evidences. Now, beyond the four Gospels, since you asked for evidence, when we keep these four Gospels aside, what we immediately have is the first century church history. So we have church history. Again, this church history was written by Luke, who was a physician and also A-class historian according to the secular historians, by the way. But then, oh, you might say this is again from the Bible. Let me keep it aside. We have the first century fathers exchanging letters and writing letters to various churches. Even these documents qualify to be extra biblical evidences to prove about the existence, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But you would say, oh, these are written by Christians, so set it up, throw them aside. Even if I have to keep them aside, what else we have? Okay, let me give you non-Christian evidences. I think at least you will consider non-Christian evidences for the birth, existence, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So let's see what evidences we have beyond the four Gospels and non-Christian evidences. So let's see what we have. The first one, the first runner-up is Tacitus. Tacitus was a Roman historian who lived from 56 to 120 AD. Now, who is Cornelius Tacitus? He was known for his analysis and examination of historical documents and is among the most trusted ancient historians. He is not a Christian, by the way. He is a Roman historian. He was a senator under Emperor Vespasian and was also proconsul of Asia. Now, he wrote Annals, the history of the four Roman emperors. Now, in that, what he wrote, Tacitus, what he wrote, I'll read it out for you, and then let's see what we can infer from this reliable historical piece of evidence. So this is what he writes. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. Now, Tacitus is writing, and in his writing he admits certain things. From this piece of evidence, what we can infer? What we can infer is that there was a fire that broke, and Nero, he was looking for scapegoats. Then what he did was that he put the blame on Christians. And what Tacitus writes here is that Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians. Oh, Nero was persecuting Christians, and he says most exquisite tortures. Esther Dhanraj says that Christians, their beginnings were with bloodshed, and Christians started their religion with brutality. But history says that Christians were persecuted for their belief in Jesus Christ. Esther, history says something against what you are trying to make people believe. Historical accounts say something else. Christians were persecuted, on the contrary to your view. But then that's beside the point. The point that I am trying to show here is that Christus, that is Jesus Christ, from whom the name had its origin, Jesus Christ suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our own procurators, Pontius Pilate. Now, Tacitus admits that Christ existed, and then he experienced, or he suffered, the extreme penalty, and he also gives historical reference, that is, during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. Precisely, he nails it down. When Jesus existed, and under whom he suffered the penalty, and who declared this judgment on Jesus Christ? Pontius Pilate. All historical figures. So this is first piece of evidence. I'll give you second piece of evidence. Second piece of evidence comes from, not from the Roman, but a Syrian philosopher. A Syrian philosopher by the name Marabar Seraphian. He lived in AD 70. Now, in his letter to his son, this is what he writes. What benefit did the Athenians obtained by putting Socrates to death? Famine and plague came upon them as judgment for their crime. Or the people of Samos for burning Pythagoras. In one moment, their country was covered with sand. Or the Jews by murdering their wise king. After that, their kingdom was abolished. Now here you see Marabar Seraphian, a Syrian philosopher, he says that what Jews benefited by executing their own king. After that, their kingdom was abolished. Now, is he a believer? No, he is not a believer. Is he a Christian? No, he is not a Christian. But he admits to the fact that there existed a king by the name Jesus. And by the way, while Jesus was being executed, it was written on the cross, the King of Jews. So here we have the piece of evidence that Jesus existed and he was crucified, he was killed. Now, next evidence, Pliny the Younger. He lived in 61 to 113 AD. He was the governor of Bithynia, wrote a letter to the Emperor Trajan. It's the conversation between a governor and emperor. So it's a letter. Now, what did he write? Early Christians were also described in early non-Christian history. So this is the proof where we have. This is what he writes, Pliny the Younger. They, the Christians, were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day before it was light, when they sang in alternate verses a hymn to Christ as to a God, and bound themselves a solemn oath not to do any wicked deed, but never to commit any fraud, theft or adultery, never to falsify their word, nor deny a trust when they should be called upon to deliver it up, and which it was their custom to separate. And they resemble to partake food, but food of an ordinary and innocent kind. What can we infer from this? This is what we can infer from this record of Pliny the Younger. What is it? The first Christians believed that Jesus was God. The first Christians upheld a high moral code. Next, what we believe, and these early followers met regularly and worshipped Jesus even in the face of persecution. Now, they were convinced that Jesus was God. Even when they were persecuted, they didn't leave their faith. But now you see, Pliny the Younger could have said that these Christians believe in a person who never existed. But he doesn't say that. He said these people came together and they they set a high moral code of living for themselves. Never to lie, never to cheat, never to commit fraud. So this is again a Roman testimony that we have. Another one. This is the fourth evidence that I am giving to you outside of the Gospels. What is the fourth one? Is Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, who lived from 69 to 140 AD. He is also a Roman historian. Now, Suetonius was a Roman historian and analyst of the imperial house under Emperor Hadrian. Now, his writings about Christians described their treatment under the Emperor Claudius, who lived in 41 to 54 AD. Now, this is what he writes. Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. This is what he writes. Because the Jews at Rome caused constant disturbances at the instigation of Christus, that is Jesus Christ, he, Claudius, expelled them from the city Rome. Reference Claudius, Life of Claudius 25 and verse 4. This is the reference if you want. Another piece that the same Gaius Suetonius writes, Nero inflicted punishment on Christians, a sect given to a new and mischievous religious belief. Now, what can we infer from these two pieces of evidences? Now, these people are not Christians. They were just exchanging letters, they were writing history, and while writing, they included about Jesus Christ. What can we infer from this? That they were committed to the early Christians. They were committed to their belief that Jesus was God and withstood the torment and punishment of Roman Empire. What else can we infer? Jesus had a curious and immediate impact on his followers. That these followers, these believers were, though he says instigated by Jesus Christ, so we can read that Jesus Christ had a huge impact on these followers. Jesus had a curious and immediate impact on the followers, empowering them to die courageously for what they knew to be true. Again, here it says that early Christians were persecuted for their belief in Jesus Christ as God and the person of Jesus Christ. So these are the things that we can infer from these historical evidences. So, Christus, Jesus Christ, instigated, according to his words, the early followers. Let me give some more evidences for you. Fifth evidence. Now, this evidence, earlier evidences from Roman historians. Then I provided Marabar Seraphian, a Syrian philosopher, and now I'll give you an evidence coming from the Greek literature. Lucian of Samosata, who lived from 115 to 200 AD, he was a Greek satirist. He used to mock Christians. He used to make fun of them. Now, in his writings, this is what he wrote. The Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account. Now, he admits to the fact that Jesus was crucified on that account. You see, these misguided creatures start with the general conviction that they are immortal for all time, which explains the contempt of death and voluntary self-devotion, which are so common among them, and then it was impressed on them by their original lawgiver, that is Jesus Christ, that they are all brothers from the moment that they are converted and deny the gods of Greece and worship the crucified sage and live after his laws. All this they take quite on faith, with the result that they despise all worldly goods, alike regarding them merely as common property. So what can we infer from this? That Jesus was crucified on that account. Jesus was crucified, and again this sets the record that early Christians set a high moral standard, and they live up to that moral living, which was the teaching given by Jesus Christ, and worshipped this Jesus as God, and they left the gods of the Greeks. So what can we infer? Jesus taught about repentance and about the family of God. These teachings were quickly adopted by the followers of Jesus Christ and exhibited the world around them. These are the evidences that we have. What else? What else we can have? Are there some more evidences that we can see? Of course, yes. We have Celsus, a Hellenistic Greek, an opponent of Christianity. This is what he says. Jesus had come from a village in Judea and was the son of a poor Jewess who gained her living by the work of her own hands. His mother, the mother of Jesus Christ, had been turned out of doors by her husband, who was a carpenter by trade, on being convicted of adultery with a soldier named Panthera. Being thus driven away by her husband and wandering about in disgrace, she gave birth to Jesus, a bastard Jesus, on account of his poverty, was hired out to go to Egypt. While there, he acquired certain magical powers which Egyptians pride themselves on possessing. He turned home highly elated at possessing these powers, and on the strength of them gave himself out to be a god. Now this person, he hated Christians, and then he interpreted the holy birth of Jesus Christ as something illegal, something immoral, and he interpreted further. But here we are not bothered about his interpretation. What we are bothered about is that his acknowledgement, being a criticizer, a heavy criticizer of Jesus Christ and early Christianity, he doesn't reject the existence of Jesus Christ, but he acknowledges that his existence, the existence of Jesus Christ, his miracles that Jesus committed. So what can we infer? That Jesus had an earthly father who was a carpenter, possessed unusual magical powers, and claimed to be God. Now, are there any more evidences that we have for Jesus Christ? Yes, we have. Josephus is he lived the. Now I gave you the evidences from the Roman historians, Syrian and Greek. These were the people who wrote something about Jesus Christ. Then let's look at some of the even earlier ones. Josephus on Jesus Christ. Flavius Josephus lived in AD 37 to AD 100. Now he was a Jewish historian born in Jerusalem 4 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. So that's why his testimony contains the eyewitnesses accounts. Means it matches that quality. Now he produced two pieces, that is, one is Jewish antiquities, another one is Jewish war. In these two he talks about Jesus Christ. What does he say? This is what he says. About this time lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was the achiever of extraordinary deeds and was a teacher of those who accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. When he was indicted by the principal men among us, and Pilate condemned him to be crucified, and those who had come to love him originally did not cease to do so, for he appeared to them on the third day, restored to life, as prophets of the deity had foretold these and countless other marvelous things about him. And the tribe of the Christians, so named after him, has not disappeared to this day. Now, this testimony coming from Josephus, people doubted that, oh, this is a fabrication, an interpolation by the 3rd century Christian historian Eusebius. So we cannot trust Flavius Josephus because this could be an interpolation by Eusebius. But then something happened. What happened? In 1972, Professor Shlomo Pines of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem announced his discovery of a different manuscript tradition of Josephus' writing in the 10th century Milkite historian Agapius, and this account was Arabic language. Now, when this document was found, this document in Arabic was compared with original of the Josephus account, and they are identical. Not only that, there is a Syriac manuscript. Even that is compared with the original one, and from this testimony, what can it is proved that with the other manuscripts, it is proved that whatever Josephus was saying, it is identical to the other records. So from this report, what can we infer? What can we infer? That there was a wise man called Jesus, that is his existence. His conduct was good and he was virtuous, about the character of Jesus Christ. Jews and other nations became his disciples, that talks about his influence. And Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die, reference for another historical person, Pilate, Roman judgment, crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ. These can be inferred from this testimony. Not only that, the disciples reported that he appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion and he was alive. So it even proves or shows the historical evidence, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So his disciples remained faithful, and lie wouldn't convict disciples in the face of persecution, because they were even willing to die for this. So now, from the antiquities, another piece of evidence from Josephus, from the antiquities, this is what he writes. Having such a character, rash and daring in context, Ananus thought that with Festus dead and Albinus still on the way, he would have the proper opportunity. Convening the judges of the Sanhedrin, he brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, whose name was James, and certain others. He accused them of having transgressed the law and delivered them up to be stoned. Now, what can we infer from this evidence is that there was a person, Jesus Christ, he had a brother James, and this James was stoned. Now, these evidences are not bits and pieces. For a historian, these are valuable evidences for the proof and for the fact that Jesus existed, Jesus died, rose again, and all these pieces put together, it's a cumulative case. In logic, we have inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. The third type of reasoning is abductive reasoning, which is taught in law schools. which we also call it as cumulative case. When you put all these pieces together, they corroborate as evidences to what Gospels are saying. So, Esther, you asked for eyewitnesses record, I gave you the 4 Gospels. You wanted more than eyewitnesses, beyond 4 Gospels. We have the epistles written by the disciples of Jesus Christ, which are beyond the 4 Gospels, but then I didn't mention them. The early 1st century fathers' writings, I didn't mention them. So carefully, what I took was the non-Christian accounts emerging from Rome, from Roman historians, Syrian philosophers, Syrian accounts, and Greek satirist accounts. From these, we have looked at the evidence for the existence, for the divinity of Jesus Christ, how the early Christians responded to Jesus Christ and what was their belief, and the early Christians and their high ethical moral standards of living, and all these pieces put together, we have more than enough evidence to believe that Jesus Christ existed for his birth, existence, death and resurrection. So, Esther, hope you are convinced. Let's see whether she is convinced or not.
How can a few scattered passages of Josephus, Pliny, Tacitus, or Philo do justice to someone of Jesus' stature? If Jesus is what the Bible claims, doesn't he deserve more mention than just those few sentences that address him as perhaps certain Christ or Jesus, the brother of James? If you actually look at it, those scattered passages are an insult to the biblical Jesus.
Are you serious? Do they look scattered passages for you? I can't believe you said that. Now, Esther, I know that you are not a historian. But the thing is that for a historian, these are valuable evidences. I don't think the scholars, the historians would say what you're saying. You want to know what the scholars are saying? Let me tell you what scholars are saying. Modern scholars such as Simon Greenleaf. Simon Greenleaf, the principal founders of the Harvard Law School, you know what he did? He thought he is going to disprove the Gospels. And he actually set out to disprove the Gospels, the founder of the Harvard Law School. And he wrote treatises on evidential law which became textbooks all over the world. This is what he says. Of the divine character of the Bible, I think no man who deals honestly with his own mind and heart can entertain a reasonable doubt. For myself, I must say that having for many years made the evidences of Christianity the subject of the close study, the result has been a firm and increasing conviction of the authenticity and plenary inspiration of the Bible. It is indeed the Word of God. Now you see, this, the principal founder of the Harvard Law School says that he weighed the evidences and the Gospels and the Bible is Word of God. Let me give you another historian, Christopher Tuckett, a secular Oxford historian. This is what he says. All this external historical evidences about Jesus Christ certainly does render highly implausible any far-fetched theories that even Jesus' very existence was a Christian invention. The fact that Jesus existed, that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate for whatever reason, and that he had a band of followers who continued to support his cause, seems to be part of the bedrock of historical tradition. If nothing else, the non-Christian evidence can provide us with certainty on that score. Well, I don't think classical historians or A-class historians of the world would agree with you. By the way, I quoted secular historian for you. Another historian I would like to quote, his name is E.P. Sanders. He is historian at Duke University, and this is what he says. We may add here a short list of equally secure facts about the aftermath of Jesus' life. His disciples fled. They saw him after his death. As a consequence, they believed that he would return to found the kingdom. They formed a community to await his return and sought to win others to faith in him as God's Messiah. So, after putting all the pieces together, this is the conclusion the Duke University historian comes to, E.P. Sanders. Do you want to hear what an agnostic historian and Bible scholar is saying? His name is Bart Ehrman. Let's hear what he says.
I cannot see evidence in archaeology or history for a historical Jesus.
Yeah, well, I do. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. Well, I mean, okay, yeah. I mean, I have a whole book on it. I mean, so there is a lot of evidence. I mean, there is so much evidence that it is not. I mean, I know in the crowds you all run around with, it's commonly thought that Jesus did not exist. Let me tell you, once you get outside of your conclave, there's nobody who. I mean, this is not even an issue for scholars of antiquity. It is not an issue for scholars. There is no scholar in any college or university in the Western world who teaches classics, ancient history, New Testament, early Christianity, any related field who doubts that Jesus existed. Now, that is not evidence. That is not evidence. Just because everybody thinks so doesn't make it evidence. But if you want to know about the theory of evolution versus the theory of creationism, and every scholar in every reputable institution in the world believes in evolution, it may not be evidence, but if you've got a different opinion, you better have a pretty good piece of evidence yourself. The reason for thinking Jesus existed is because he is abundantly attested in early sources. That's why. And I give the details in my book. Early and independent sources indicate that certainly that Jesus existed. One author that we know about knew Jesus' brother and knew Jesus' closest disciple, Peter. He's an eyewitness to both Jesus' closest disciple and his brother. So, I mean, I'm sorry, but again, I respect your disbelief, but if you want to go where the evidence goes, I think that atheists have done themselves a disservice by jumping on the bandwagon of mythicism, because, frankly, it makes you look foolish to the outside world. If that's what you're going to believe, you just look foolish. You are much better off going with historical evidence and arguing historically rather than coming up with the theory that Jesus didn't exist. Sorry.
So according to Bart Ehrman, it's not even a debate or argument whether Jesus existed or not, because all the scholars, maximum in the classical scholarship, they believe that Jesus existed. And he also says, unless you want to make a fool of yourself in front of the classical scholarship, you can argue otherwise. But we have strong evidences for the existence and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Oh, by the way, I have one more philosopher and scholar according to Esther Dhanraj, and he seems to believe that Jesus Christ did exist. So you want to hear who that is? Steve Tiger. Let's hear him out, what he has to say.
So I see that you are referring back to Jesus and what he said. So I assume that you are a historicist, meaning you believe, if that is the right word here, that Jesus was a historical person.
I tend to believe so, yes. I know that there are people who point out that there's no actual definitive proof that such a person existed. But I tend to think that there is. I think that what I've read tells me that there was a charismatic rabbi who attracted a band of followers and who ended up as one of the countless men who were crucified in that era. So the Jesus that appears as a character in the Greek scriptures.
I had to interrupt here to point out to an interesting usage of yours. You refer to the Old Testament as Hebrew scriptures and to the New Testament as Greek scriptures. Is there a reason that you don't refer to them as Old and New Testaments?
You heard him. He said that he comes to believe that Jesus existed. Now, I have quoted all the evidences, all the classical scholarship and their view, and even your own scholar, Steve Tiger, he believes that Jesus existed. Now, it is up to you what you want to believe. Blaise Pascal said one thing. Blaise Pascal was a mathematician and a theologian and philosopher. He said, truth is so obscure in these times and falsehood so established that unless we love the truth, we cannot know it. Esther Dhanraj, it's up to you whether you want to believe or not. But I think it is not the lack of evidence. It is that you have decided in your heart, no matter whatever is the evidence, I'll not believe. Why? Because first of all, you asked for eyewitness account. I gave you. And then you asked for beyond the four gospels. I gave you even that evidence. Even after giving that evidence, you say that, oh, these evidences, these scattered passages prove nothing. They don't do any justice to the personality of Jesus Christ. So I see here you are not interested in the truth, neither you are interested in the evidence. So it is a willful rejection of the evidence. So I don't think you are a logical person. Oh, by the way, I'm a professor of logic and philosophy. I have been teaching logic more than 10 years now. So if you want to know, I worked as a professor of logic in one of the prestigious institutions, Government Law College in Mumbai. If you want, you can check. I taught their logic from 2014 to 2019. You can cross check if you want. So Esther Dhanraj, I leave these evidences up to you. You make your decision.